How's it going, everybody? Welcome into yet another video today. I've got a fun one for you. So a while back, I did a video titled 10 discs I wish I had bought sooner or known about sooner. And I decided to do kind of a follow-up to that video since everyone really seemed to like that. It was very popular. I think a lot of people were introduced to discs or molds they hadn't quite heard of or thrown before. So I've thrown so many discs that it's really easy for me to pick out another 10 that fit perfectly in that category. So hopefully you'll find some more in this video that you haven't tried out or haven't even heard of that will kind of bring to your attention, because these are 10 more discs that I think are phenomenal. Just to kind of further explain, basically each of these molds have been picked because they're discs that I didn't exactly find when I first started playing disc golf. Some of them are less popular molds, and some of them are popular molds that I just kind of kept off my radar for longer than I would have hoped, or that would have benefited me, certainly, because they've been a key asset to my game for one reason or another. So that's what composes this list. But no more stalling, we'll get into the first disc right here. All right, so the first mold I've got here is the P3x from Disc Mania. Now, this mold is kind of interesting because realistically, this iteration of it, the new Disc Mania manufactured mold, is not a very old mold at all. It hasn't existed for very long. They just remade it. However, it is pretty true to the feel and flight from what I've heard of the old P3x. So that's kind of what I'm basing this off of, because I never threw the original P3x. I didn't really even think about picking up this putter until this one came around. And there's a few reasons I really like this. I've always been somebody who enjoys throwing putters, and especially power gripping putters. And that's why the P3X is great for me, because we have a low profile putter. It's not super deep. It really is kind of built for throwing. It has a nice bead to give a little bit more comfort as well when doing that power grip. And it's extremely torque resistant. This is kind of a unique putter in the sense too that it's kind of a Swiss Army knife. I really like this because you can throw it on anhyzer and it'll hold, but don't get this confused. Like, it has a lot of overstability. If you give it hyzer, it'll fade out a lot. It can hold into wind on hyzer. If you throw it flat, it goes straight for a while, but then has a nice consistent fade at the end. But it's the flatness of this disc and that shallow profile which allows for the high speed understability. You get that a lot of times in those flatter, low profile discs, and that's what allows you to shape those power turnover lines as well with this disc. It's just such a jack of all trades. I've used this my primary throwing putter for a little bit now, and I don't see it leaving. It kind of reminds me a little bit of actually the PX3 from Prodigy, a similar idea, kind of a beaded, shallow, low profile, overstable putter. But I think this one is a little more versatile, and I've really been loving it in the S-Line plastic. It's just been a great throwing putter for me all around, and I do not say that lightly, because it's probably the most important disc in my bag at any given moment is the throwing putter. All right, the next disc I've got here is pretty familiar to most of you. This is a Zone. However, I didn't just bring this to attention just because it's a Zone. This is an ESP Zone. So this one is plastic specific. It's really the only one that's like that in this list. And I didn't throw an ESP Zone until a few years ago. Obviously, I've grown up knowing about the Zone. It's such a popular overstable approach disc. Everybody throws it. But the ESP Zone is different, and I don't know why, but for whatever reason, whenever it comes to overstable discs, a lot of people like throwing the more clear plastics. You don't really go for like the Star or ESP type plastics. There could be some logic behind that. Maybe it's not as overstable. Well, actually, in this case, it is the correct logic. I'll get to that in a second. But for whatever reason, we just avoid it. And so I never even thought of touching an ESP Zone. The only reason I started throwing this is because I had this cool Eagles Crossing stamped one, and I wanted to just give it a try. And what I found was so surprising. You actually do get a much straighter flight out of this than you would out of a Z or a Z Flex Zone or a Crystal Zone, anything like that. Actually, even a TI Zone, I'd argue. And you get a completely different disc almost. Instead of having this really overstable approach disc, you have one that flies straight for a long time before getting a fade, but still remains to be very torque resistant and allow you to throw some force over angles with it. I found it as, instead of just a forehand disc, because like for the Zone for me was primarily just a forehand, okay, I need either a hyzer or a flat to hyzer type shot. This became something I was throwing long backhand drives with, getting it to flat and ripping on it, and it would give a long straight flight as it seasoned in, maybe a little bit of turn before having that consistent fade at the end. It never became something that I was scared of relying on even into wind, but it's just such a more useful disc than your standard chip up with forehands or flex scramble forehand disc that a lot of times the Zone can be, it became something that you could get long distance with. I found myself turning to this on shots where normally I would need a mid-range for the distance. I could throw this instead and have that long straight flight. It would still go far. You know, I could get this maybe 300 to 320 feet, which with a normal Zone, I certainly couldn't. So yeah, the ESP Zone, if you've never tried this, and I don't know if this is true for other similar situations like a Star Toro versus a Champion Toro, but at least for the Zone, I found that having this in the ESP Plastic was a fantastic iteration of the mold and something so different than what I expected. All right, so next on the list, we have another disc that is very popular. This is just one that I didn't give a shot personally until much more recently, and that is the Glitch from MVP. Now, this is one of the most popular discs on the face of the planet, and there is a couple in this list like that, but I just want to explain to you why it took me so long to throw this disc and why I've enjoyed it so much. So when the Glitch came out, of course, I work at a disc golf store. I felt them. It just wasn't really for me. I tossed them maybe a couple times, and I didn't quite get it. What's funny enough is what makes the Glitch so special is it's so much more than a disc golf disc. This disc can be so much more. The first time I truly enjoyed throwing the Glitch was actually at the beach playing catch with this disc, and that really is the point of this disc. It was meant to be, you know, it says hybrid catch disc. It was meant to be a catch disc and a disc golf disc. But what it allowed me to do when playing catch with it, because it does make sense as a catch disc, it's light, doesn't hurt your hands a ton, it has a nice gliding neutral flight. It actually got me some good practice throwing a slower, deeper rimmed kind of lid style disc, because that's something I've never had. A lot of the ultimate players or players with more touch are really good with this lid style disc. I've never been good with it, but using it as a catch disc kind of taught me some things I could improve on, you know, just controlling the nose angle of the disc, getting more spin on it from close range. And what I found is I actually really love the way this disc flies, so much so that I'd consider putting it in my bag at some point, because there are so many things you can do with it. It is so versatile, but it all stemmed from using it as a catch disc. And I think that's such a unique thing that this disc has. So if you're listening to this and you haven't tried it either, give it a shot, and maybe not for the reason you expected. It might not be the disc that goes straight into your bag, but toss it around with a friend, give it a try, and you might learn some things. I think this would be a great disc to kind of teach somebody disc golf form with and angle control. And hey, you might love it so much you might put it in your bag. I really enjoyed the Glitch. All right, moving up in speed now, we move to the F7 from Prodigy. Now, this is a disc I had somewhat known because in college I threw all Prodigy bag for a few years. So I knew about the F7. I even had one in my bag, but I didn't really understand the purpose of it. It really just kind of sat in there as a, well, in case I ever need to throw a roller disc, and that almost never happened. But just recently I put it back in my bag, and I've begun to understand how useful this disc can be for a variety of shots. Of course, it is good for those rollers, but power down on an F7 and give it some hyzer, and this disc can do a lot of things in the woods, in the open, whatever you need. It's so easy to find certain angles with this disc because it doesn't take a lot of speed to get into those certain shapes. I've really enjoyed just throwing it hard with a ton of hyzer and getting those kind of hyzer flips that push a little left out of your hand and then late fade over to the right. That's a shot you can't do with a ton of different discs. I've liked it for low effort forehands that pop up without a lot of power, and just trying to do a lot of the things that I like throwing understable discs for these days. I kind of started doing that with the Latitude 64 Diamond, and this has just kind of been a process of finding other discs that I can throw similar shots with. And this F7 has been awesome for me. I've really loved it. It's so much more than a roller disc, and I don't think a lot of people give it a shot. I know a lot of people aren't even necessarily sold on Prodigy as a whole, but I think their plastic's pretty solid, and I think that the F7 is a great mold. Super versatile, and especially, you know, if you're a beginner player, this could be a great first driver, but all the way up to the advanced players, there's a lot of things you can do with this disc, and I think that is what makes an awesome disc, is when it has so much versatility from no matter what your skill level is. Next up, we got another fairway driver that I'm really pumped about that has recently entered my bag, and that is the Glory from Latitude 64. This disc just ended up in my bag kind of on a whim. I was looking to get another overstable fairway in my bag, just kind of threw it in there. I've thrown the Honor before, and this has become probably my favorite fairway or close to it really fast. It's so dependable. You can throw it hard and flat and just get these long straight flights with a little bit of fade at the end. It'll hold up on a hyzer. You can throw good flex shots with it. It has reliable overstability without being flashy about it and just dumping out of the flight. It still has a ton of glide. It goes really far for a 7-speed. It sits super comfortable in the hand, and of course it's always a bonus to have that amazing Royal Grand plastic as well. Just one of the best plastic blends on the market right now. I've loved the Glory. This is a disc that went from an unknown for me to something where if I lost this one, I'd replace it immediately with the exact same mold. There's been a lot of fairways that sit in this slot over the years. T-Birds and Eagles have been really popular. You kind of have the Vulture with Discraft, or the Athena now. But I really think this is one that slips under a lot of people's radar. The Glory is a phenomenal disc. I'd highly recommend giving this a shot. If you're looking for something with a little more overstability, the more advanced players, you'll be able to get a lot of a straighter flight until that fade. But I'm confident, even if you're throwing really hard, you're going to get a nice little fade at the end of your flight with this. And it'll be plenty useful in a lot of different situations. Yet another fairway driver. This is another one that is a very popular disc, something that I just held off on for the longest time until I could really bear it no more, and that is the Passion from Discraft, or in my case, this one is the Fashion because Connor sharpied that in at some point. This is actually a first run. Listen, I've spent probably the better part of the last year watching my friends throw the Passion and just being in awe of how good they are with it, but I just didn't think it was going to fit my game. I always like the way this feels in the hand, even from when it first came out. It's got a little bit of a chunkier, like a narrow rim, but it's got a little bit of depth to it, which is something I really like. But I just didn't really think, like I see Hunter throw the hyzer flips to this disc. I'm like, that's not my game. I don't think it would make much sense for me. But once I started throwing it a little bit more recently, because I had to try it again, I was blown away by how easy it is to get this disc to pop up and get those long flights. This disc is the closest thing to a disc golf cheat code that I've seen in years. I'm not even kidding you. I have seen so many people succeed with this disc, just throwing the most effortless hyzer flips, getting so much straight distance, and then it has such little fade at the end of its flight that you can stay in tight fairways. I genuinely believe this might be the best overall fairway driver on the disc golf market right now. I'm not being paid to say that. It's just so incredible, and you're seeing it used at all levels. Even the top disc golf professionals are throwing this disc, all the way down to amateurs. I've seen tons of AMs who this is just their best go-to distance driver, because it does go far as well for an 8-speed because of the amount of glide that it really has and how much it wants to stay in the air and stay straight. It's not veering off the line. So recommend this disc. If you have not tried the Passion like myself and you're still ignoring it, living under a rock, get one of these in your bag, toss it. You're going to be blown away. I guarantee it. I got one more fairway driver here, and this is the Spice from Clash Discs. First of all, shout out this incredible new steady ring plastic they're going to have coming out, or I think they have released now. Feels incredible in the hand. It's got a nice gummy feel, but the rim is still somewhat stiff, which I like. And I mean, the rings on these look insane. But not to mention the awesome font choice for the Spice. But this disc came out a while back. It was a collaboration with Eric Oakley, and when it first came out, I immediately liked it, put it in my bag. But for whatever reason, I kind of took it out. Maybe I was just trying out new discs and just cycled it out. Didn't throw it a ton. It was just recently, probably a few weeks ago, that I decided to put it back in my bag because I received this amazing one in the mail. And I've just slowly learned again why this disc is so cool. You have a disc that is a 10-speed, feels like a 10-speed, isn't crazy overstable, but just doesn't have a ton of glide. And I know that's a weird sales pitch, but let me explain to you why this is so good. It's a disc that is probably best thrown on flex shots, whether they be backhand or forehand flex shots where you're looking to get a little bit of turn. And it allows you to hit lines that offer that, where you need to weave in a certain way. But a lot of times the danger with flex shots is they either crash really hard to get out of the sky, or they glide too far past the basket. This disc doesn't have such a hard crash, but it doesn't glide super far either. I mean, they only give it a 4 glide, and normally I don't pay much attention to that. But for whatever reason, this thing kind of just falls out of the sky once it loses speed, but it does it in more of a dropping way and less of just a crashing fade and skip. It's a really unique flighted disc, and every time I throw it, I'm kind of surprised at the way it finishes its flight. And I've just had a lot of fun throwing it. I've thrown so many good shots with it since I picked it up again. And it just keeps finding its way back into my hand because I have a lot of confidence in it. feels great in my hand. If you haven't tried out this disc, I'd really suggest it. A lot of these discs I'm suggesting do have really unique flight patterns, because that's something that stands out to me as somebody who's thrown so many discs, and the Spice is one of them. Make sure to check these out. They have them in a lot of different plastics. I think they're all great. All right, moving into some distance drivers now. First off, we've got the Grace from Latitude 64. This is another disc similar to the story of a lot of these, where I may have tried it when it first came out, maybe threw it a few times, just didn't really stick. But recently I put it back in my bag when I started my break series at Independence Park, a series where I need to throw a lot of tight gapped shots with distance drivers, and I have fallen back in love with this disc because of its reliability when throwing hyzer flips and getting a disc up to straight and up to flat, to fly straight I should say, but not losing a ton of distance even though it is an 11 speed. Right out of the box, you have a disc that'll pop up a little bit, at least at my arm speed, and then have a gentle fade at the end. As they beat in, you get it to pop up and maybe have a little bit of turn. It's just a really good disc stock. And a lot of times you get a disc that has a nice like hyzer flip flight and stock. They're either too overstable or they start out right at the perfect spot and then they get flippy. The Grace does a really good job of starting out in a really nice spot where it's usable. You just give it a baby hyzer at the beginning, and then its sweet spot lasts a long time because you started with the baby hyzer to get it up to flat. Then you just slowly add a little more hyzer as you move on, as it beats in. But I've yet to get to a point where these things get too flippy. I actually just lost my other one before picking up this one. And yeah, I haven't had an issue with it getting too understable. So I think that's a great thing about this disc. It really stays where you need it for a long time. Really a lot of Trilogy discs do that, at least in the understable side of things. And super comfortable in the hand. Once again, it's in that Royal Grand Plastic. Can't go wrong. The Kristen Tatar stamp. Gotta love it as well. So definitely check out the Grace if you're looking for an accurate driver that gives you plenty of distance without sacrificing control. Next, we got another Clash distance driver here. Well, another Clash driver, I should say. And this one's also in that really cool steady ring plastic. This is the Wild Honey. The first time I ever threw a Honey, it was known as a Honey. This is just a disc that it wasn't around for a very long time before I picked it up. I kind of just wish it was, because it transformed my forehand and backhand roller game. It's such a unique disc because it has a lot of the flight characteristics and feel you would expect out of a really understable disc, but you can do so much more than that, especially with forehands. This has been my go-to forehand disc for a long time now because I don't have a ton of power, but it allows me to throw it on a little bit of hyzer, have it pop up, and just goes so much further than it should. I mean, I remember throwing this disc in front of Gannon Burr at one point on forehand and him being like, how did you get it to go so far when you have no power? And while that did cut a little bit deep, it makes sense. It truly seems to do all the work for me. It's similar story on backhands. Brand new, you can get some really awesome hyzer flip to turn lines. As they beat in, they become more of a turnover disc or a roller disc, but they remain really useful on the forehand throughout their life and really comfortable in the hand as well for a 12 speed and how fast it is. I've loved this disc forever. I wish I'd had it sooner in my career. The Wild Honey is just a phenomenal disc. Definitely check this one out from Clash. It rocks. Once again, another disc that's usable for all skill levels of disc golf, really, once you can throw probably 260 feet and up, I would say. All right, the last disc here, another Clash disc, actually, not sponsored video. This might surprise you, but it is the Candy. And this has been my putter since the beginning of this year. For those of you who don't know, every year I do a bracket on Twitter, where now X, I should say, where I have my following pick my putting putter for the year for me. And I give them options. I usually give them a bracket of 16 or so to start with. This year I kind of just chucked the Candy in there because I had felt it once and I thought it seemed okay and I wanted to have a Clash putter, but it has really turned around my putting game. This is actually the only putter, this one I'm holding, that I've used since January of this year, January 1st. We're now in July. It's still held up. It still has the exact same flight realistically. And what I love about the Candy is, compared to putters I've used in years past, the effortlessness it takes to get it out of your hand into the basket. I know I'm not the best putter, but genuinely I've had such a better time and more positive time with this putter than the ones I've used the last few years. It pops out of the hand. It's so comfy in the hand. It's very straight flying, but it doesn't turn on you. It's not necessarily going to bite back to the basket if that's something you like, but it kind of just holds its line. No matter what angle you get it, it holds onto it. Really friendly in that manner. And these putters do throw well too, if that's what you're looking for. They start out really straight, beat into kind of an understable throwing putter, but I've liked it as my primary putting putter, and I think I could have benefited from having this earlier on in my disc golf career. Even though I'm not the best putter, it is really great. I'd highly recommend trying it out. All right, thanks again for watching this video. If you liked it, make sure to like, leave a comment, and subscribe to this video. Let me know if you enjoy seeing this type of video where I explain discs that you might not know about. I really think it's fun to bring these to people's attention because I try to throw some different discs that people might not know about and explore what's out there. I have the privilege of getting my hands on a lot of plastic these days. So let me know how you feel about these type of videos. I enjoy making them and talking about discs because I'm passionate about discs. That's why I love disc golf so much. The discs are a huge part of that. Thanks again for the continued support on this channel, and I'll see you again next Monday.